Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You found us. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
We're here to be with you along your journey and to share our experiences in RC aviation. If you have any questions, thoughts, or want to share a flight story, hit us up at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Now, buckle in. Let's take off. All right, and we're back. Welcome back, everybody, to episode 49. Flying off of water, flying off water, flying on the water, seaplanes. But if by the end of this we figure out something else or need to name it something else,
No, we got to do it right now.
Yeah, well, just saying that's the thought. But if by the end of this I'm like, oh no, here's a totally better episode title, then we'll just rename it. I don't know, maybe we'll come back here and dub over this bit. Welcome back to episode 49. Insert title here.
It's a duck! Or flying off the water.
Yeah. So how you been, Matt?
I've been pretty good. It's been, this last week has been good and weird. My kids are away on vacation, so I had the house to myself, which is a rare occurrence during the school year. And it allowed me and you to have an opportunity to get together, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. Which we got to go out and fly a little bit, and we'll talk about that. Not a bunch, but we did get an opportunity to run out there. So,
and then we'll talk about a little about the history of boat planes, right?
Yeah.
Or float planes, or whatever they were at the time. I'm curious to know, because I didn't realize it, how far it goes back. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I did double check some of those dates.
Okay. Yeah. I've been saying, 3 weeks from when we did the Spitfire build, which was the 22nd, right?
Yes.
And 3 weeks would put that on the weekend of the 14th. Correct?
Oh, yeah. Why do I feel like there's maybe something there?
I know there's a lot of things there for me. So we will have to find an alternate weekend, and it'll likely be later than earlier, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I know.
But I know you've got LARP on one of those weekends.
Yeah, that's the weekend of the 13th.
Okay, so why don't we plan on the 20th?
Tentatively.
Let's plan. Okay, right now, be on the lookout. But we're aiming for the 20th. Is when we're going to have the second Spitfire build night, which means I will likely build a second Spitfire. And those of you who were building with us and have still a little bit more to go and want to build the rest of it with us, you're welcome to bring it along. Joe, you're going to be chugging along on what you had been working on, if there's anything left by then.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and talk about the build night. So, because we're into what we're building and flying, and that kind of starts with the build night, at least for me.
Okay. Well, what I want to do real quick, so we always put this stuff at the end. I think it's really important that we identify that if you like what you're hearing and you value what we've been doing here, we invite you to join us on Patreon and help us make this show possible. I know we've had a couple Patreons already, and we really thank those guys immensely. And also, if you have any questions while you listen to this thing and you start yelling at your car stereo or wherever you're listening to it, because you're like, these guys don't know anything, help us learn more. And with that, you're going to help all the people who are listening who need to know the right thing. Okay. You can reach out to us at aviationrcnoob.com. Is where you can find us, and in there you'll be able to email us. You can email me at Matthew at aviationrcnoob. Joe, what is it? I don't email myself anymore.
I'm pretty sure it's Matt.
Is it Matt?
I'm pretty sure it's Matt at aviationrcnoob.com.
And then Joe at aviationrcnoob.com if you want to reach out to Joe about something I said, so you can, you
are Matthew.
It's Matthew, because I remember you always like, it's Matthew, and I'm like, but I'm Matt. I'm like, that's okay. You set it up as Matthew, and that's perfect because that's my name. Don't worry
Okay.
about it. And also thank everybody who's on the Discord server and creating a really amazing community there. I wanted to get those things because we always put that at the end. And I feel like if you're listening and you only care about like maybe what we're doing in the week, or maybe you only care about the history segment, or maybe you're looking towards a guest and you kind of skip, what you may not be hearing is the stuff at the end. And that's us basically saying, here's how to reach out. Please let us know if there's something you want us to talk about, if there's something you want to know more about. And, you know, again, if you want to help us make this show possible, help us keep the website going and things like that, join us on Patreon. And we can do that. How do they get to Patreon?
Patreon.com/aviationrcnoob.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so let's go back to what you were about to talk about, which was what have you been up to in the last couple weeks, Joe?
The build night is sort of the one night ahead, and I say that, yeah. So the build night, I was basically I pulled the Spitfires that you had done for me on the scroll saw back just before Flight Fest last year.
Last year. It's been that long. We've had those things cut out for a long time.
They have been in a trash bag since then. Clean that you put them in.
Yep.
But I pulled those out, and it makes sense. I knew there was going to be like it has some markings here and there, but just I was having to recreate a lot of the lines.
So what I forgot to do while I was rushing through the cut of the wing is I forgot the beginnings and ends of the score cuts and the mark of kind of where the aileron surfaces are.
Mm-hmm.
And those are really not easy to duplicate.
No.
And it would have been a really big help to have those on there. And I truly apologize. So Joe's looking at it going like, oh, Matt, what'd you do? He didn't say anything. He was being really graceful. I'm like, Joe, what did I mess up? He's like, nothing. You did fine. I'm like,
hey, Richard, who was in there building and had the physical plans in front of him, what's the measurement on this?
Yeah.
What's the measurement on that? Let me just recreate the whole drawing here on the wing. So that's sort of what I did that whole night, was get all the wings drawn, all their lines marked and drawn and partway cut. And I was working on getting a wing put together. Had it folded over, had the spar in it, had the servo in it and everything. And then it occurred to me that I did not mount the spar correctly.
I'd like to mention something specifically about the spar of the original FT swappable Spitfire.
Okay.
Is the way it's set up is there's only one spar and it says cut 2. And the way you set it up is they basically are mirrors of each other, and they kind of like overlap in the center, and one faces back and one faces front. So that way it's like a left and a right hand shaking.
Right. Now,
I only cut the thing and there was just marks on either end, and it didn't say which side to cut or to score so that you could fold it over and have a spar. And I did the cut wrong on one of mine because I did it like 2 of the same or something, and I bent it the wrong side. And it's like, oh, that should have been the other side. So I ended up just cutting it. But that's the one part of the planes that can get you. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world if you get it backwards. You just take the one that you got backwards, because only one of them will be backwards, right? One is going to be fine. The other one will either be the mirror image and it fits right and you're good, or it'll be the same as the spar you just made, and then that won't work, right? So you can cut it at the line and just glue it. I mean, you're just doubling up the thickness of the spar so it has extra strength. Right. That's really ultimately all you need. The paper being continuous does help, but not as much in the way they made it. So you could have cut yours and glued it on the other side, unless you glued it the wrong way, and then it's, well.
Yeah. Oh. Well, so fortunately I had 4 spars because I had 2 planes. And so when I figured out what was going on with the wing spars,
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I had made them. I cut 2 of them, but I didn't cut them correctly. But if I cut the other 2 the other way, then I would have 2 sets that were cut correctly.
Right.
So I'm good. I'm good on my wing spars, except that
now you have a plane without spars.
Yeah. Now no, I'm just a wing down and a spar down because when I glued in the spar, the Spitfire wing spar, it is doubled up for a while, and then towards the end it goes single, which I don't know why it does that.
Well, that's like I said, single. Where the hands start shaking, right? That's the part where you're like having a shaking hand. One from the right side, one from the left. And the extra glue surface in the center and at the end of each of those parts that are, I call it shaking or overlapping in the middle, that extra glue, for some reason, adds so much extra strength, it's ridiculous.
Okay. Hold on. Let's rewind. Does the double up line up with the inside edge of the wing, or was that double up supposed to be set back a bit so that because the elbow where it angles up, that goes up into the other wing a bit.
Correct.
Okay. So what I did was I mounted it the double up flush, and what you were just saying had me terrified that I had indeed actually mounted it correctly and that I junked a wing for nothing. But no,
no.
I needed to have set the wing spar into the wing a couple inches.
Right. So that the turn in that little, I'll call it the hand, that's supposed to be that point that it turns. That's the center of the wing. Okay. And you have it set where that hand, is only a single thickness of foam. Where it stops at double, that's where you set it into the wing and it stopped. And then so you had like the full plot spot it overlaps is like that was just sticking out, and that was supposed to be half of that.
Without delving too much further into that, because
it's an easy mistake to make, especially if you don't have the tabs all cut and the groove cut out. That helps. That really helps with the
alignment. I didn't have the tab holes in the wings and the tabs on the spar, which
you can blame
is fine.
Me. That's okay.
I blame you, but it's okay. You did me a favor. By cutting them out, I'm having to learn to work around that.
And that's one of those things. We also, look, if we had done this like the month after we cut them out,
you'd have remembered to tell me all that.
Yeah, we would have remembered a lot of things. And but it's been 9 months, so
so no big deal. And I don't want to talk too much on details of that because unless somebody is sitting there with the FT Spitfire plans in front of them and knows where in the build process we're talking about, they're going to be like, what are these guys talking about?
It's just one of those things. This is what happens when you're building without the plans in front of you. Because I think we're looking at the PDF sort of, and I was doing the whole build by memory because I'm like, I've built enough Spitfire. I've built enough FT planes. I know the build process. This isn't that hard. However, this plane has a couple unique pieces to it. And if you get them wrong, well, it's not a big deal, but it's wrong.
Well, yours also had a skin on it. It was hard to confuse what went where.
It did help.
Anyway, but we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
So,
okay, go ahead.
Because of that, I had to rip that wing apart so I could get my elevator or my servo back. But it was nice to see some guys come and hang us. We had Richard was there, Tony was there, Jesse came out.
Yeah, Jesse
was actually pretending to build.
He did. He brought a plane out and sat it in front of him while he talked to us.
That's right, and I think he placed the tail on it and then took it off and then placed it back on, and that was sort of his progress for the night.
And he confessed that, he's like, I just don't build while I'm hanging out with people. I enjoy talking and yeah. He goes, but I
enjoyed ragging on him though.
I'll build this later though.
Yeah.
And he did.
I enjoyed ragging on him.
Yeah, that's fun. He's a good guy.
So yeah, there was the build night, and then the Saturday morning. So you drove down Saturday, so we could hang. We ended up playing a bunch of board games and eventually went flying. But while you were driving down, and while you were here, I was putting electronics into the HRC7. So the electronics are all in. It was largely bench tested. servos mounted, control horns,
Mm-hmm.
and we can kind of talk about that in a few. But that's sort of my building.
Yeah, it looked good by the time when I got there. It was looking very good.
Mm-hmm. And you got to see the glider for the first time.
I know, right? And then all that time you're like, no, it's in there, Matt. And I'm like, God, there's got to be a way to get in there. And you're like, no, man, it's in there. So I picked
He's talking about my little wood coupling piece inside the fuse.
Right. You indicated that basically you packed it solid with foam in there. So it would be very hard to, I don't know, to get in there, right? And so I picked it up, and I'm like, wow, that is really solid. Like, that's pretty. That's a lot of foam in there. But and then I was able to kind of look at what you were doing, and look at where the damage was, because that was hard to spot as well. There's like a hairline crack in the wood.
Yeah,
and you're like, yeah, I can't, because that's just gonna bust. I'm like, well, it might, but geez.
Well, it already wasn't holding the wing well.
Right. And that makes sense, of course, because, it's a lot of, moment, a lot of rotational torque on that part, which is what's prying it apart. And it's along the same wood grain and all that. Anyway, we'll get into woodworking. But so then I kind of was able to explain to you what I was trying to get to you earlier, is that piece that's kind of coating a lot of that spar, like, you may not be able to get to it directly. You may not have to dismantle that whole part, but you should be able to get a window that gets you closer to it, so you can like see what's going on and get tools in there. And then we talked about basically saying, grab some wood glue, make that little window open, like instead of the flap that would normally be where you put your battery, you make another flap going the other direction all the way to the spar so you can see it. And then you just take a little bit of wood glue, put it in the crack. And honestly, you probably just let it go, because there's a lot of like pressure keeping that generally in the right location. But it's pretty.
But I've also got bar clamps I could.
Yeah, and then you basically just you can just put a book on the thing, a couple books, and it'll probably be fine. But anyway, you let that dry overnight, and then I think you'll be in good shape. You could even do strapping tape in like an X pattern, so that when you put the wing, it'll leave the opening for where you put the wings in, but it'll sort of be an artificial clamp. So
I got you.
It won't be able to flex as much. It'll be helpful. I don't know if it'll be enough though. Just ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, okay, cool. I could see. And then that's a long, thin wing.
Yeah, it is.
So that was really cool to see. It was cool to see in person. I still wish, and I'm hoping that maybe I get a chance to see it fly in person.
One day.
Yeah.
Yeah. One day.
And so I did the Spitfire build, and I forgot that I had skinned. I have a pile of like 6 of them or something like that, because I know my kids, I want to build at least one for each of them, knowing that they're going to bust it while they learn. And then we'll just build another one, and it shouldn't be a big deal, especially if we have a bunch cut out. Well, I had printed out a skin for it from like Rasterize or something like that from ages ago, like 2 years ago or something like that. So I had apparently cut it out and put it on top of one of those, and that was ready to go. So when I pulled the stack down of the Spitfires, I'm like, oh, there's a skin. It's all ready to go. Well, I guess I know what I'm building today. So I started the build night, kind of pulling everything together and saying hey to everybody, and then I started building. And apparently I built like somebody was chasing me with a stick that's on fire or something. Because by the end, this Spitfire was complete. It was fully built. Everything was in it. And I think I'd put the electronics in it. Like I had put the servos in it and glued them in place. I hadn't.
Yeah, you were cruising, man.
I hadn't put like all the servo arms. I didn't double check it. And I certainly hadn't made the connections and the little control, the parts that go on the flaps and the surface control surfaces. But I know that that didn't take long. So that's what I did in the morning before I left, while I was kind of, doing all the things that I do in the morning, which is feed the fish and take care of the animals and myself and getting a couple things ready for the trip. And I'm like, well, let me put a couple things on the Spitfire. And all of a sudden, in like about 45 minutes, I had a fully ready to go Spitfire.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, look at this. I guess we're bringing that. Let's see if we can make it. So I brought that and the old Spitfire, the one that had been hung up in a tree.
Yeah.
And I had the T6 Texan. So I said, well, that's enough planes. Because I knew that we were going to be spending some time playing some games, doing some other things that we really enjoy. So I brought those down and off I went, and we came down and we enjoyed ourselves all day. And I kind of enjoyed kind of being there with you while you were kind of tinker building, putting little bits here and there while we were enjoying our time playing board games. And then we did get out to the field, and you and I were both like, what in the world? Like, everything was working like 10 minutes ago. What in the heck? You just run into some like typical crazy, like, oh, I forgot this one thing. And because I did, now I can't fly.
Yeah. So
what happened?
There's two, but now I found out 3 different things that went on with my plane. And I don't know this, none of which is the Seven's fault. I just want to put that one out there. So I'm using the Seven's electric package. So it's ESC and its motor.
It's 2212, orange can motor, 1400 kV. Like that's
I say it's thing, but I think that was the can you bought for me. So I don't think that's necessary. I don't think it necessarily came from.
It's the spec.
From Sam.
Yeah, it's the same spec. And I talked to Sam, and he said, yeah, that's pretty much what we use. Like it may not be the same ESC, and he may specifically have a different one because he has better experience with it. I don't know. And I just grabbed whatever Amazon had with it. And it's a JMT ESC 30 amp, I think 2 to 4 cell deal. And it's like, I think 3 amp or 2 amp going in the out of the BEC.
It's something. So I specifically remember looking at it on the bench, the ESC, and seeing it was rated for 3 and 4 cell. I was like, great, I've got 4 cells. Because I got 2 4-cell 2200s.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, if I get this thing in the air, I'm going to have a long flight time. The motor's only rated for 3, but I knew I'll just, keep the throttle lower and not cook my motor. Well, when I was working on the bench, I was working with a 3-cell. When I was testing everything, getting everything hooked up. When I went out to the field, then I put the 4 in it. And when I put the 4, the servos were going haywire.
Yeah, it was like when you put them to full, they would like jump
bounce.
Or jitter. Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
Bounce is a good way to put that.
Yeah, between like, I don't know if it was 50% full or.
Yeah, it'd go like 100 to then 115% and then back to 100.
We can't go past with a servo, but.
You can. I mean, if you set your value to 120, it'll go whatever up to a certain point. Like, if you have room in that servo arm travel,
right?
You know what I mean. I don't know what you'd set it out to, but either way, it was jumping to like as if it went to 120% and then back to 100.
And it was, but it was not like a super rapid flutter.
No,
it was just not even that fast, perhaps. And so we were trying to figure it out because obviously I couldn't put it up in the air like that, and I was going through my transmitter trying to see maybe my mode's wrong as far as like, cause I got the radio master, maybe it was communicating incorrectly. Long story short, I pulled the 4-cell and put one of your 3 cells in there. And it all worked fine. So something with the 4-cell is causing an issue. And I did ask the guys on Discord today, maybe what could cause that, and the only thing they could really think would be the increased voltage maybe coming out of the ESC, out of the ESC's BEC to the receiver. Like if it was somehow the 4-cell was amplifying some sort of noise, and so they suggested maybe getting a noise choke.
Yep, which is basically like a little donut magnet.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there's some you can snap, and they actually had a good example of it. There's some that you can literally buy as aftermarket, and you kind of snap it around it, like a little plastic case with some donut magnets halves, and you just close it around the wire, and that eliminates any stray signal.
Yeah,
it evens it out.
Know. It seemed awfully consistent for noise.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I will do some more investigating with it later. The other issue that arose was I meant to, so on the servo arms is where I use the clevises with the screw clamp.
Yeah.
That drives into the side of the push rod. And on the underside of the wings where the aileron servos were, I meant to put a dab of glue to lock the nut of it in so it wouldn't back out and fall off my ailerons.
Yeah, which is the reason why I don't use them that often anymore, because I've had that same problem.
Yeah.
And you had the solution for it, which is you just glue the nut down. It can't rotate, and if it can't rotate, it can't back out.
Mm-hmm. Well, precisely that, it backed out. Because you can't cinch them down and they stay. Because the moment your servo goes and has got the push rod, it needs to twist.
Right. It needs to rotate, which then,
because of the push rod,
it's going to untwist the
loosen
nut.
that nut.
Yeah,
yep.
It's going to loosen the nut.
And it gets that. Yep. So basically my nut fell off right there in the grass, and I had, because I was also looking at my ailerons as I was swinging left to right. Remember, I was looking, I was like, why is my ailerons acting so weird?
It was weird because it was like, they're going, it's all good. Oh, no, it's not going at all.
Yeah, this aileron's not going at all, then it is, and it's kind of not, and then it is.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my servos came disconnected from my wing. It was just not the outing that plane was going to be mated.
No, and I'm kind of glad that it wasn't something else that we thought, oh, maybe we can. Like, no, that means you could go back and take a little bit more time and make sure all the things are right.
Mm-hmm.
And then make sure that, because that main will be a lot more successful.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
But speaking of maidens.
Okay. Yeah. Well, so I had the newly minted Spitfire that I had ready within 4 hours worth of work, I think.
Yeah, it was pretty quick.
Including a skin. And it, so we went and got it and tried to get it in the air. So we realized we came out towards the end of the day and we're like, well, this is the golden hour, but it also means that it's also going to be short-lived. So let's get this going on. And so I did the balance test. I'm like, this feels a little on the tail heavy side. So, but we'll see. Let me launch it because it looks like it might be close. And it just might be real sensitive. Well, I was flying it, and the first let go, it went in the air, but it was a roller coaster. It was up and down and up and down and up and down. Like there was no easy way to control it, and I couldn't get it going left or right in a controllable way. So it wanted to tip stall and do all sorts of weird stuff. And I'm like, okay.
Well, you're also launching and flying at like really low throttle levels.
Yeah, I put it to like 75% throttle. And
was it even that high?
Yeah, it was. And then I gave it kind of I didn't like throw it. I didn't like huck it. I just sort of let it go. And now the reason why I did that is because there's two reasons. One, the first time I flew the first Spitfire, that's how I launched it. And it just flew like a dream out of my hand. It was like perfect. And I think some of that has to do with the skins and the glue on the plane made the plane more tail heavy than the original build without the skins. And so the average overall mass is behind the CG. Mm-hmm. And now that there's no more mass all around the plane, it's further back. I needed more weight in the front. And the 2200 3-cell it's perfect on the regular one, but it's not enough with the skin because there's glue.
Well, remember the trouble I had getting the Vulture leveled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I kind of knew, but I was like, well, maybe. Anyway, so 2 propellers later, I say, it's
You're welcome.
It's CG. Yeah, and thank you, by the way. So the first one I went and it landed, and it's one of the those really cheap, like inexpensive and cheap as well as far as quality. They just touch the ground and boop, they're gone.
Yep.
And they're 10 by 4.5 slow flies. I don't know what brand they are, and I think it's like UXL or something. I don't know. They're all over Amazon. And I know they're going to break. If they touch the ground, they're done. It's like, all right. And you're like, well, I got a bunch of them. I'm like, well, we might need them all. But okay, let's see what we can do. So
yep. Anytime I go flying, I take about 5 or 6 of them.
Exactly. And I don't know why I didn't have them, but anyway, so I appreciate that. So we put a new one on and off we went, and I almost had it. And then I started realizing this one's going right for the water ditch. And I'm like, oh no, I better pull up. And I just missed the ditch and got to the other side of it and broke the prop again. And so retrieved it, got another prop on and said, you know what, do you have a heavier battery? Because I'm like, I can put this other pretty heavy battery in it and it'll just be a heavy Spitfire. And that'll be interesting, you know? And you're like, no, I've got the 4-cell. I'm not using it because the 7 isn't, we can't fly it. Because why don't we try this? And so I'm like, well, the whole system.
Let's give you an upgrade.
Right. And so, you know, I'm using the traditional CPAC. So the radial CPAC. So it's rated for 4S. The ESCs are 35 amp. They're rated for 4S. So I knew the system would be fine. So I'm like, all right, plugged it in and it had just the right weight. And I was like, all right, let's go. So off, I sent it into the air. I'm trying to remember, I think I crashed it one more time trying to figure out, because it wanted to turn one direction pretty hard for whatever reason.
I think you set it down a little rough.
Yeah, I had to
one more time.
You bring it around and bring it back, and then it's like, oh, I busted it one last time. You had one last prop, and I'm like, all right, let's get this on here. And so I sent it and flew it, and we were flying around pretty good. But it had a tendency, I couldn't tell if it was the rudder or the ailerons. And at one point I had it kind of hanging from the prop and it wasn't trying to rotate around the prop. It wanted to nose over to one side. So I was like, oh, that's probably rudder. And so I was trying to kind of fix that in the midst of flying it. And so I got it enough where I could fly it around and we had some fun. And I was flying around and I was realizing it's starting to look a lot more like a silhouette than it was just an airplane flying. And so I was like, okay, well, this will be very short-lived. And I'm bringing it around. There's a couple pine trees kind of in the middle of the field, as it were. I'm like, cool, we can use that as like a pylon. And I'm going around it. And for whatever reason, the way I'm standing, and I'm only looking at the top of the tree, I'm thinking it's a big pine tree. So I come around it. I come back around the backside, and I'm like shooting back off into the open field beyond. Mm-hmm. And you turn to me, and what is it you say?
As if there is a second tree back there, Matt.
I'm like, what? All right.
Yeah,
well,
I don't know how you missed it.
And at that point, I mean, I was already kind of full tilt going through it one way or the other. I'm like, if I can't just shoot up and hope I miss it, like it was kind of acting squirrely enough where I think I'd cause more trouble trying to duck and dodge out of the way of that tree than I would just trying to go through it. So I just left it and just hoped I wasn't going to hit the tree. And fortunately, I didn't hit anything, and we made it to the other side. And we had a little bit more acrobatics and had some fun and brought it in. Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you what, I tried to play it calm, but I was definitely going, there's another tree over there. Oh no. Oh my God, we're gonna crash. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, for a little while, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you and I haven't been out flying together in
too long.
Oh man, it's been Flight Fest last year?
No, trying to think. I thought that one of the times, like 6 months ago, when we played D&D, when we got together for one of them, I think we got together one of the mornings just real quick and ran out and did something, and then you guys left. But it was like a couple times ago, and that was a while back.
Okay.
But it wasn't as far back as Flight Fest, but it was pretty far back.
It's been a minute.
Yeah.
It's been a minute.
So it was awesome to come visit you guys. It was great to get out and just, I don't know, do hobby stuff together and fly. Yeah. And I was your 7 looks awesome. And I cannot wait to see it in the air. I urge you to, I'm going to send you those pictures of the landing gear. I urge you to make landing gear for it, because I think you're going to have a lot more fun flying it and landing it and taking off and flying it and landing it. I think you're going to enjoy that when you get to it.
Maybe I'll bring it up this weekend and we can tinker with that.
Okay, that should be fun. Good.
So, All right. We talked about the next build night coming up. Before we get into our main thing, because we actually running a little long on that today. What you thinking?
No, I'm trying to remember. The only other thing I did is Stargazer Voyager thing, the flying boat. Kind of in lieu of this topic today, I created that, like the little minimum RC version. I made a big version of it. So I put the electronics in it the other day. I got a power pod, kind of fashioned a power pod for it and put some servos in it. And I'm trying to figure out where in the world, like how big a battery. I think I got to rearrange the way the tray is set up. So I'm trying to figure out how it fits, but the electronics are in. So it should be in the air probably by the time you come down. I'll either have given it a maiden or be ready to give it one.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that'll be a flying boat, but a totally different way.
Oh, and one last thing I've been working on, which is largely tonight, just because we had the build party and I didn't have anything ready for it. We've been talking about the podcast liveries for the Spitfires going to Flight Fest. So what I'm doing right now, we were doing it before we started recording, or I was, is going through the FT Spitfire plans and using them to create masked layers in Photoshop that I'll then be able to, Matt and I can talk and figure and actually have some livery done up, which from there, you guys can either print off and use as a skin, or I'll export them in such a way that's like primary, secondary, tertiary, so they can be cut if you want to use them for masks for spraying if you're doing the spray paint. So
okay, yeah.
Ideally, by the time this episode goes live, if not shortly thereafter, just keep an eye out. And the best place to find that's in the Discord, but we'll try to be sure to post that on our Facebook page as well.
Awesome.
Okay.
Cool. So that usually brings us to the community section. We did talk about the build night already. We talked about the upcoming build night on the tentatively the 20th of next month. Did we get any feedback?
We did. Richard, good old reliable Richard, wrote in for feedback. He said, just listen to number 48 and around the 28 minute mark. Joe was trying to think of the Italian that produced early drawings of prototype aircraft, and as Matt pointed out, it wasn't Archimedes, but Matt, I am sure that it wasn't Michelangelo either, but Leonardo da Vinci.
It was da Vinci.
Yep.
Yeah. I just knew it definitely wasn't Archimedes. It's like that guy displaced water and stuff. That's totally different.
But then he went on to say, good topic on 48 on what to do if it's too windy. I know I speak about these a lot, but found that having the RF5 light installed really helps when it's windy. Flight mode 3 still allows full control of the plane, but helps counter any sudden wind turbulence and makes the handling it as if it's a much larger plane. So
yeah, that makes me, because it's always so windy when I fly or where I fly. And especially the time I go and fly, I might need to invest in some of those boards.
I've got one.
Yep, me too. It's in the Piranha.
Oh, okay. I bought one that I got with the FTCA community discount.
Yeah, I remember. That's right, you did. Yeah, you need to put it in. You should put it in your Corsair.
I've thought about it. We'll see.
Yeah.
All right. So, on to the main topic. We're talking about flying off water, or water flying, or seaplanes.
Oh, wait a second.
Planes.
Before we do that, don't we have a history section?
Oh, I thought we were going to do that afterwards.
No, history section is always after the community section.
Well, I thought history section was normally after the main topic.
No, man. The history section is always before the main topic, because history section almost always kind of leads into the main topic.
All right. Well, we'll do that then. And then we'll get into that. So, there's footrest again. I just kind of put together a short history on are you moving stuff?
No.
Okay. Yes, that's why it jumped around on my screen.
It did.
I was like, where did my notes go? So I just put together some short notes on the history of boat planes. And I'll go ahead and we'll talk definitions later. So the first patent for a boat plane was in 1876.
What?
Which predates the Wright brothers.
Well, yeah, I mean, it predates by like a lot, by 30 years almost.
But also there were attempts at powered flight.
Yes.
Just nobody was getting it to work yet.
And they weren't getting the controls correct, for sure.
Mm. And they could get, powered gliding, but the whole thing for flight was that you had to take off, fly around, and land at a same elevation or higher than you took off from. That was sort of the requirement of saying, yeah, it's flying.
I would have to look up the definition officially on that, but that sounds fair to me.
Yeah.
I'd like.
I mean, otherwise you could just like fly off a hillside and glide down.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
Anyway, first patent was in 1876 by a Frenchman named Alphonse Penaud.
Penaud. Yeah.
Penaud. Yeah, I'm American, so we butcher everything. I'm sorry.
P-E'_Naud. So
yeah, it's E with the apostrophe.
Oh, it is.
Okay,
I got it.
Yeah, the apostrophe's on the E. And then after that, that's about all there was to be said on that.
Could be Penaud.
Austrian Wilhelm Kress is credited with building the first seaplane in 1898 or 1901, depending on the source. So I know it's a 3-year span, but I saw both dates. He called it the Drachenflieger.
Dude, I dig the name, man.
Yeah, basically a dragon flyer.
Look at this plane.
Oh, you're looking at it now?
Yeah, look at that thing. That is full of wings.
Yeah, it is.
That is really cool looking.
However, it did not fly. Its two 30-horsepower engines were not anyway, it's two engines. It says 30 horsepower were not powerful enough.
That sounds about right.
And the motors were too heavy for takeoff.
Yeah, that was one of the big inventions, or one of the things that the Wright brothers focused on, was the conventional engines that were there were much heavier for their power level. And they were working with engine manufacturers to create lighter engines so that the powered flight would be possible. Because they're like, these things are just too heavy. We need to make them out of aluminum or less steel, something. So, because these are just monsters.
Okay, I know why that 30 horsepower was messing with me, because I was thinking of a 22, but the 22 is kilowatt. Okay. So basically what happened with this plane, it may, I'm not saying it would have, but it would have gotten up and flown. This plane was done with, I think, grant money. 5,000 krone grant from Emperor Franz Joseph.
Okay.
He wanted to, in the attempt to create the first heavier than air flying machine. And so, with the grant money was designing and building of this plane. And in Kress's notes, he knew that he needed 37 kilowatt, of power from an engine weighing no more than 220 kilograms or 475 pounds. But when they went to purchase motors or get the motors, to have a motor like that designed and built was exorbitantly expensive. And so, they cut the cost and went for an existing automobile motor that was both weaker and heavier. And so because of that, it was never able to take off. Now, it was able to... You gotta quit sticking stuff in here. You're throwing my notes
I didn't expect it to be so big. Sorry.
So, now it was able to taxi successfully. It had controlled taxi for taxiing around, but also with a headwind. And so, even though it never got off the water, several of his elements were proved, successful.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
And then one of his pontoons or sponsons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those are the outriggers.
Yeah.
Are the sponsons and then anyway, go ahead.
But one of those was damaged when he had to make an emergency maneuver to dodge something in the water, and the plane sunk. Then, June 6, 1905, Frenchman Gabriel Voisin flew a towed kite glider on floats.
Okay.
So I guess they towed it up to speed and then let it go. I'm not sure. But flew at about 150 yards. Later he built a powered float plane, but that was unsuccessful. And then March 28, 1910, Frenchman Henry Fabre?
That's like Brett Favre. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But I'll tell you, the Frenchmen were really on this. March 28, 1910, Henry Fabre flew the first successful powered float plane, the Fabre Hydravion,
mm-hmm. That's
which
what it looks
was
like.
which was which is the French word for seaplane, essentially, I believe.
Yeah.
I know I had the notes pulled up over here, and it was called that because it was actually unnamed. And so it sort of adopted the French word for what the plane was. I was trying to look over here. Yeah, I don't see it in the notes there. But his first flight was 500 meters or 1,600 feet, and he had no prior flight experience. Which at this point, I guess few had. But
yeah, I mean, there's only a handful of people who had the ambition, really.
Mm-hmm. And then he flew 3 more times that day, and then within a week, flew a distance of 5.6 kilometers or 3.5 miles. And then the aircraft was damaged pretty bad in an accident. So
it's a pretty neat looking plane there. It's really cool because there's some good pictures of these, and they are wildly. I don't know. They're wildly different than I expected, I guess.
Yeah, it's not what we would necessarily feel safe jumping into.
No, but I guess they were kind of modeling it after either bats or birds. It's really all that was there to work with, right?
Yeah.
Nobody had proven too much else. And I kind of added my favorite, I'll call it my favorite early flying wing. I think it was one of the first flying wings, the Burgess Dunn BD-8. And that's basically Canada's first Navy plane. They basically literally put it on a boat. So rather than having it on some like landing gear skids, they literally put a long, thin boat with sponsons on the outsides where the skids are on the ends. And that was a boat plane.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the first naval plane in the Canadian Navy. And it was also purchased by the British Navy and the American Navy.
Okay. Well, that was up through the first flight of a seaplane. So
yeah, nice.
There's plenty more, and then it dives into the world wars and all that. But
yeah,
I wanted to get us up through the first one.
Mm-hmm. Good work, man.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can we talk about the actual topic now?
That's what we always do after the history.
Okay. So a few definitions out of the way. The seaplane statement.
The main topic is flying off of water, right? So our goal is to talk about how to get a plane ready to be able to fly off the water, and then things to watch out for when you're doing that, and then maybe things to be ready for when you're trying to land it. Mm-hmm. Is that fair?
I think that's fair.
Okay. And then first thing we need to do is talk about what do you mean by boat plane, right? Let's talk about those definitions.
So seaplane is what we would generally, I guess, what's generally called a plane that flies off the water. But that's broken down into 2 subcategories then. There's the boat plane / the flying boat, and then there's the float plane. So the boat plane / flying boat would be more like the Sea Duck. The fuselage serves as its main source of buoyancy.
Okay.
And under the wings, you may have floats attached to help stabilize the plane. And then a float plane would have the floats mounted under the fuselage to provide the buoyancy. So that would be like a Cessna or a Cub, with pontoons mounted where the landing gear would be.
Okay.
And then you can have amphibians, both boat plane and float planes, amphibians that have landing gear, and as such are capable of landing land or water.
Yeah, like an Icon to a degree. Rutan Ski-Gull is a good example. There's an interview that Flight Test did with them. They had him on the phone, and he was talking about his Ski-Gull, and it's pretty interesting because he was talking about how when you're landing on an airstrip, right? One, it's smooth generally, and two, your landing gear has got shock absorbers, right? But on a seaplane, when you're landing with the body of the plane itself, when you hit a wave, you're taking the whole airplane and getting smacked around, basically. There's very little to absorb that impact, right? The whole plane is absorbing the impact. And he had come up with an idea on how to basically reduce that impact and have it so that it's a little bit more like you're landing with a little bit of shock absorption before you hit the water, right? Mm-hmm. And so listen to the interview, because if you're interested about that kind of thing, he talks about that aspect of flying seaplanes.
Now, was that an old episode or was that something fairly
It was
new?
one of the old podcasts, and I'll see if I can find I'll see if I can find the episode, and we'll put a link to it. Let me see here. It's the Burt Rutan podcast number 74 from Flight Test. It's on YouTube. I'm going to give you the link. We're going to put it in the show notes right now. But yeah, and so when we're talking about, like, when you talk about a boat plane, you know what I mean? The difference with a boat plane is like the hull is absorbing the impacts, right? Whereas a float plane, the plane still is to a degree, but it's limited on how much is impacting the water, I guess.
Yeah, well, there's that. You've got the rods that reach down, basically that would hold your landing gear that's now holding the pontoon. So I guess there's some flex in there, to kind of absorb it.
Yeah,
but yeah, I didn't think about it. But yeah, you got the big nose hull of a boat plane just smacking on those waves.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the differences in landing and flying those craft. Anyway, so let's get into, I guess the next step is really like, well, how do you make a plane a boat plane, right?
How do you make a plane a boat plane, Matt?
You attach floats to it is one way. You could basically make like a small, like I'll call it a plastic boat, or make it out of some other material and literally attach it where the landing skids are, essentially, which is what they did with the BD-8, the Burgess-Dunn Flying Wing. And they've done it with a lot of other airplanes. But if you look at, there's even a Spitfire with pontoons, basically. And so...
Yeah, it was the... I can't remember the name of the naval version.
Yeah, I don't...
Seafire,
that's right. Thank you. You're right. And, it's just two long pontoons. And one of the things, I guess, you can buy floats, basically. You can either pre-make them. There's plans that you can build them yourself. You can build them out of like XP, extruded polystyrene, the pink stuff that you like wrap around your house, right?
Right.
You can make it out of Depron, much like you would out of Dollar Tree foam. You could take Dollar Tree foam, but you're going to have to protect the skin, protect the paper. But that's one of the beauties of making out of Depron. Like, it's not, the way it's glued and all that stuff. You're not going to ruin the foam. Right, it's not gonna. When it hits the water, it's not gonna fall apart. with the Dollar Tree.
Assuming all your glue joints are watertight.
Well, even still,
well,
yes.
It's not going to fall apart, but you're going to lose that buoyancy.
You'll lose some of the buoyancy. It depends. I mean, if you make it solid out of Depron, stack them up and then shape it.
True that.
I've seen that done. So that's one way to make sure that you don't have a problem. And you can do much the same with Dollar Tree foam, where you just take the paper off of both sides and glue it using the foam tack. And then you have a solid piece and you just sort of shape it with sandpaper. You kind of cut it generally to shape, and then you sandpaper to final shape. And a lot of people who want it to look, if you want it to look glassy smooth, you can wet sand it with a finer grade sandpaper is one way to do that. You could also take a lightweight spackle and put it as like a final skim coat, and then you sand that down using the fine sandpaper to get a really smooth coat. And then when you spray paint it, you use enamel, and then that spray, when it's done, is going to look glass smooth, especially with like 2 or 3 thin layers. It's going to look beautiful, and it's going to be looking like a pretty sleek piece of pontoon.
Which will also help it get through the water easier.
It does. One of the things you'll notice about, what do you notice about all the pontoons that you've seen for planes? They have a thing on it that helps it get into the air.
Oh, well, see, I wouldn't have noticed that, and I've only seen it on the Sea Duck.
Okay. Well, yeah, because it's part of the plane itself, like straight. So what is that called?
I forget what. You go ahead. I forget what it's called.
It's a step. I just thought you'd remember from what we talked a little bit about it before. But even if you look at like the
Hercules, I pay attention? Sometimes.
Not anymore. No, so even if you look at like the Spruce Goose, that's a boat plane.
Yeah.
And you could see like right behind where the CG is, there's a little break in the bottom of the hull, and it steps up by a short amount. And what that is the whole point is that way, when the water is traveling under the hull of the boat, it wants to basically cling to the bottom of the boat as the boat travels across the water. Mm-hmm. And so as you're gaining lift, the boat is starting to be less buoyant in the water, and it's starting to rotate to go from kind of back heavy, right, a little bit kind of sitting tail into the water, and it's starting to actually get lift from the wings itself, so it's going to rotate to be level, right, like it's flying.
Right.
But it's still got all the water stuck to the hull, right? So how do you make sure that the back of the plane doesn't get stuck into the water?
Yeah, that step up.
You have the step. And if you have the step, all of a sudden that water is broke along the back of the plane, and now it's not attached to the bottom of the hull on the back half of the plane. So now all you're doing is you're basically adding a little bit of nose weight towards takeoff effectively, but it's almost balanced with the amount of water pressure pushing the nose of the plane up out of the water the faster you go.
Right.
So it ends up creating a pretty decent balance, but it also makes sure that your tail doesn't get sucked into the water even further as the wake builds and lowers the surface of the water behind the tail of the plane. And now you've got a nose high attitude as you're trying to take off. Your airspeed's low, nose high attitude means you're going to stall. And that's really dangerous. So to avoid that, you get the step there, and the step helps break that pull down into the water, and it also helps reduce the amount, and that allows the lift to do what it needs to do and keep the plane level and all that kind of stuff. So if you'll notice,
and they'll have that even on the pontoons put
every single one. I've made, honestly, so because it's, we typically run with like easy, somewhat disposable floats or as somewhat disposable, foam planes. Build 2 pontoons, put one that has no step and one that has a step, right? And see how they fly different. And see how they take off, like what the takeoff characteristics are. They'll probably land the same, but they're definitely going to take off very differently. I think you're more likely to stall on the one with no brake, with no step.
Interesting.
Yeah. What's one other thing you really need to pay attention? We talked a little bit about it, right? If you've got floats and you've done some things to make it, what else do you have to do to the rest of the plane? Like, can we just make it out of paper?
Oh, talking about waterproofing.
Yeah. Why would you want to waterproof the plane if the only thing that's touching the water is the floats, right?
I don't know, Matt.
Because if you're like me, sometimes things don't go perfectly. And it's hard to believe.
Yep. And if you dink it or you get a splash or, catch a wingtip and cartwheel it, but it happens to still land on the floats.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've had it where I've been going really good and then the wingtip will touch and the water again kind of creates almost like a suction on the wingtip and the wingtip won't come out of the water. No matter what aileron, you don't have enough speed to get any like rotational force from the ailerons. You're stuck with the wingtip in the water, and that's it. And you're not getting out of the water. Sometimes you'll have it, maybe you have the CG a little bit wrong or you built the pontoons a little wrong and the tip of the nose of the pontoon will catch just under the surface of the water and it'll flip over like you just smack the nose of it.
Yep.
And now you've got a plane that's upside down with all the electronics pushing down into the water.
And if it's not waterproofed, not only is water going to go in, but it would kind of maybe keep the water out.
It would help, yeah. It'd give you a little bit more time to rescue it.
Right, but if it's not waterproof, that doesn't even take into account a hatch on top. But if you're not waterproofed, I can tell you my Spitfire, it took a while because it was spray painted, but the rain got to it, it fell apart. They'll go to pieces. And if it's not remotely resistant to that, you don't have much time.
Right. Yeah,
before all your stuff is sinking.
And I know when we talked about the covering episode with Chris, we covered some of the stuff about like how do you take care of, because he's in Canada. So when he flies in the snow, once he's done flying, everything he's got on that plane turns to water. So he's got to worry about this too. And it's, how do you treat this stuff so that it doesn't fall apart when you're done? And he mentioned, you can tape it and that works for a little while. You can use the covering material like Monocoat. And if you're really good about it and try to do like one single piece along the bottoms of stuff and wrap it around so that way there's no gaps or holes, you'll have a pretty watertight deal there. You can use waterproof foam board, which is basically a plastic impregnated paper. You could always just use straight foam because foam is sort of waterproof in and of itself, but you don't have the added strength of the paper, right? But when the paper gets wet, it doesn't add any strength at all. So there's a catch-22 there. But you could also add like little pieces of balsa edging to give strength when, if the paper fails.
Okay.
So that's another way to kind of say, well, I expect it'll happen. As long as I build it this way, it might hold longer. That's worth experimenting with. You could, let's say I talked about Monocoat, where you keep it like a single, and that's one way to do pontoons. I've seen people kind of wrap it, and then as they wrap, they sort of shrink, because it's like a shrink-eating plastic, effectively. Like almost all plastic will shrink with heat, and some far more, and allow for a lot more maneuverability. Monocoat's a good example of it, right? But basically, if you wrap it around and shrink it as you go, you effectively create like a heat shrink around the whole pontoon.
Okay.
And then while it's warm, you can kind of massage it into place so it stays there. And then that creates like a watertight seal in itself. You might be able to do that with other parts of your plane that you want to keep watertight. Like, again, the pontoons and the main, with the sponsons and the main pontoon. Another way is fiberglass too. I mean, that's what boats are made out of, is fiberglass epoxy stuff.
Yeah.
Of epoxy coat. You can even take the paper and just epoxy coat it if you wanted to.
Right. Which is sort of the one that I remembered, whether it was spray epoxy or brushing it on.
Or
the only thing to keep in mind,
Yeah.
The thing to keep in mind there was, I think Chris said that it made the foam more brittle.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Because it penetrates that foam and then cures and dries, so it kind of removes some of that flex that it has.
Right. So it's like it's harder, it's stiffer, or like it's more, it's a little stronger, but when it breaks, it's brittle.
Yeah. So be careful of those hard belly lands.
Okay. Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, those are ways to kind of treat each individual surface. I've used water. I've used the tape, and I found that the water will get past the tape. Like if you're using the colored tape or even packing tape, and it'll work. It'll work for a while. As a matter of fact, I made an airboat, and I used it at all hours of the night and all hours of the morning when all the dew's on the lawn, and it held up for a while, but it eventually gets past it, and it'll touch the paper. And basically now you've got tape attached to soggy paper.
Yeah.
It's now not attached to foam anymore. So it kind of doesn't do its job at that point. But it's something to consider. I know Numavig, he makes a lot of his planes out of a Depron, but he will tape cover that. Now, I think that will hold up a lot better. So it's possible that if you make a solid foam piece or fuse or whatever, you could probably tape coat that, and it would have really beautiful color. It would be waterproof because both the substrate and the surface would be waterproof.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, they would both kind of assist in keeping it that way. And if you did the hatch well enough, you might be able to keep most of the water out, especially with a good magnet and a good seal. And then you don't have to worry about waterproofing your electronics as much.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is, I guess, the next step, right? Is assume it's going to fall, assume it's going to flip over, and good parts of your plane will submerge. Like maybe not all of it, but there will be parts that'll submerge, and it'll always be the parts that can't take water.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's Murphy's Law.
Yeah. If it can go wrong, it will.
That's pretty much it. It's pretty much how my life works.
If we're wrong, Richard will write in and let us know.
I appreciate that. Well, okay, so what are the ways? I know we've talked about it in the past. Do you want to cover real quickly just the things you need to waterproof? And some of the quick ways to how? Like you can go back to, I think we have a whole episode, I think, a couple of years ago or a year ago about waterproofing, right?
Did we?
Waterproofing servos, I thought. Because when I was talking a lot about my the submarine, I was talking about how you can waterproof servos, or at least how I'd seen.
I think you may have talked about it in passing.
Okay.
I certainly don't think we dedicated a whole episode to it.
Okay. Well, do you want me to cover it now then?
Yes, because you're asking me, and no, I don't remember.
Okay. Well, then most likely our listeners don't remember either. So let's cover it again. Well, Flight Test has a couple really excellent YouTube videos, I think with Peter Schriepel. So I don't know, what is that, year 3 or 4, about waterproofing your electronics. And basically what I've learned and what it comes down to is you can take either conformal coating, which is kind of like a way to pot your electronics. Potting is basically, I think it's waterproofing, or literally dipping all of your electronics so it's in a solid ball of epoxy, essentially. Conformal coating is a hydrophobic coating material, and so basically causes the water does not want to stick to or stay on that material, that coating, so it'll run off of it. Kind of like Rain-X for a windshield. That's why it's a hydrophobic material that you spray onto the windshield, and when it rains, the water runs right off because it doesn't want to stick to the Rain-X. Okay, so you can do that. You can literally dip your electronic, like the ESC, the whole thing, in epoxy. So you can take off the heat shrink and just dip the whole thing in and just let it get solid. You can also take epoxy and kind of squirt it in and push it into the ends and keep the heat shrink on it. That way, if there is an issue and you think it's something you can maybe go fix, or you want to unsolder and stuff, you can basically take off the shrink wrap and the epoxy will still be there. So that's not as good as just completely dipping it in epoxy, but it's pretty darn good. I mean, it'll hold. The other thing you could do is you could put the conformal coating in the ends. You can also spray. There's a, I'm pointing behind me like it's behind me, but there's like a, it's like a, it's an electronic, shoot, I can't think of what it's called. There's a spray that's specifically about, it waterproofs electronics. It's a dielectric spray. And what that does is it's like an oil that coats the electronics. It doesn't conduct electricity, and it keeps the water away. So you can get that stuff. It smells like peanuts. I don't know, when you spray it. It smells kind of good, kind of weird at the same time, because that's not what you expect.
Right.
At least I don't.
I mean, I know WD-40 smells kind of weird when you spray it.
Yeah, you're like, oh, that's not bad. I don't know if I should feel good about that. So you can get that stuff, and I can't think of it. You could also take, there's like grease. Basically, you can just like
lard.
Yeah, automotive grease, basically.
Oh, okay.
Like marine grease, I think it's what it's called. Like marine grade automotive grease or something like that. And you just like smear that stuff in there. And that's one of the ways to do the servos as well. I would suggest you put that stuff around the electronics and not around the gears, because it's kind of viscous. So the gears get mucked up. I think I've ruined a couple of servos doing that. But you can also, so that's how you protect your ESCs. And ESCs, in some of those instances, when you put it underwater, especially with salt water, they may stop working, but once they dry back off, they'll be fine again. Brushless motors, you can run underwater. They're fine. If it's in salt water, you just dry it off, like use compressed air and dry them off that way, like after you're done. Otherwise, the salt will corrode the metals.
Yeah.
And then I think last but not least, the last piece of it, so you want to do that same thing with the conformal coating or all the stuff that you do to the AC, do that to the receiver. The only problem with the receiver is if you have a bind button, you don't want to spray the dielectric stuff near the button, because it will get in between the contacts of the button, and now the button is dielectric. It's basically blocked from activating, because you put it's effectively like a thin layer of rubber tape in between the contacts of the switch.
I mean, generally those buttons are inside a push-top dome, though.
Right. I'm just saying generally, but that's also it's like a filmy water that will seep in and through and underneath.
Okay.
And because that's a possibility, it's as simple as basically you can just maybe put a dab of glue or whatever, and then spray, and then take the glue off, and then put a little bit of conformal coat there. It's not super critical, or you could just spray it and hope. But it's your receiver, and if you want to bind it to something else, that might be a problem. But if you don't need to press a button, just go have fun. You want to make sure your receiver is protected. And then
you could be like us and have bind cables.
Yeah, exactly. And in which case, then you don't have to worry about it. I would protect the ends of the wires. That way they don't short circuit. That way they don't get the film on the connectors, so that when you plug in your servos, it doesn't actually connect to the wire pins. So that would
would it be that good of stuff to?
It might. I don't know. You could try it and tell us. Call in. Let us know. Okay, don't call in, but email us and let us know. Reach out on Discord. Tell us if you've tried that. If you've done the spray coating or the conformal coating, got some all over your receiver, and now all of a sudden it doesn't work because the servo leads don't make contact effectively.
That'd be interesting.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think of where the things were wrong. And I remember with that dielectric spray, they said, be very careful. Wherever you spray this, it will protect it, and it will stop any electricity from passing. You're protected. But that's part of the problem. If you're doing it to things that you don't want protected, you just got to be careful. Okay, and then last but not least, we'll talk about the servos. Servos, probably the easiest way is to just spray it with that I want to say it's like DX70 or something, whatever it is. I know in the waterproofing video, he covers specifically what that is. So it's the spray thing that he uses. And he tells you it smells like peanuts, because it does. Spray that in the electronics bay, spray that with the gears. And so what you have is there's a couple spots where water might intrude into your servo.
Okay.
Where the screws come in, although that's very unlikely. Where the servo arm and the gear there, that shaft, that's one spot of intrusion, and where the wires come into the side, that's another spot for intrusion. So what you can do is take out the screws, and now you've got a servo that's basically all of your good stuff, right? Your electronics on the bottom and the gears on the top. You can fill the whole thing with oil, and actually olive oil. It has the same density as water, so it won't be buoyant when you're done. And then you can fill it up, and then, of course, that will displace any water that might try to get in. And that'll be the same at any depth. So if you're making a submarine or a plane is going to go way deep in the, I don't know, maybe you want to make a dive bomber that literally dives into the water, and you want to see how far you can get it down. I don't know, maybe that's a contest. Maybe it can be one. I don't know. But those servos, if you know it's going to go like 10 feet down, you're going to need something like that. But for almost all the applications you'd want with an airplane, you could just do the spray. That'd be plenty.
Okay.
I wish I could find the darn spray, though. It's going to kill me that I don't know what that spray is. Here, you do that, and I'm going to look it up.
What am I doing?
You go on to the next spot, the next part. Now that I've covered what the electronics are, like how to waterproof them.
Right. I mean, you still got, how to actually take off and land.
Well, Joe, how about this? Tell me, have you flown float planes in the simulator?
No.
Well, there goes that.
I mean, here's the thing. In my experience with the Duck, the taking off was very similar to not that I've done landing gear, but it was very much how I expected it to be. Once I throttled up a bit and got her to plane up on top of the water a bit.
Yeah.
So I wasn't able to just punch it and go. I had to give it some gas just to get her moving and get her planed up. And by planing, I mean lifting up on top of the water. Right.
So when you're going fast enough to get some lift on the wing, it then starts sitting up on the step. That's what they call it. You want to get up on the step. So what's that doing? What that's doing is basically getting the back half of the plane to get out of the water. But it's still, like, the plane is still in the water, but the back half is up and level. That's getting up on the step.
Yeah. And then from there, it was just give it more and then pull back on the stick, and there she was in the air. And then 30 seconds later, I smacked into a tree. So that's my experience.
Yeah. Well, you had a great experience taking off then.
I did. You were there with me.
Yeah, it was awesome. That was exactly how to do it. It's like, okay, go faster. It's up on the step. Okay, you're ready to go. You know?
And we're airborne. Oh, look at that.
Yeah. What I've done is I have the Porco Rosso plane, the Sea Angel. Wait, is that right? I believe it's Sea Angel. And what I found was that if the pontoons dip into the water too much, it will catch. So they'll grab basically the whole front of the pontoon, and then it'll kind of like drag the whole thing down into the water. And if it's not buoyant enough to come back to the top and just kind of hang out on the surface of the water, you're basically going to go in circles, and then you're like, shoot, I can't do that. Landing, let's see. I mean, that's really taking off. Is you basically want to try to keep it going as straight and level, keep the wings as level as possible, so they're not going to accidentally dip into a wave and grab the front half of one of your either wingtips or pontoons or maybe the props. Because when they hit water, they're going to slow down. And you want to make sure that they try to keep out of the water as much as possible so that you can gain enough speed evenly to get up on that step. And then at that point, you're pretty much skimming along the surface of the water. Choppy water, so really windy, is not the best time. You want it to be as smooth as you can get it. You know, because those waves aren't going to help you. They're either going to like kind of bump you into the air before you're ready. And if they do that, then you're going to nose down, possibly.
Yeah.
And that's never, or wing tip stall and the wing will go down into the water, and then you're basically going to, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do when that happens. But let's say you get up on the step and you get into the air. How do you think you come down? What, is there anything special you need to worry about?
I mean, in my mind, it's just set your approach up, and more so than perhaps we're accustomed to in this hobby, when we belly land, fly it until you're landed.
Yeah, fly it into the ground.
Yeah.
Fly it down to the ground.
Like, don't cut out, don't pull back on the throttle and just let her flop down.
Yep. You want to keep the throttle and just keep flying, and just keep flying lower and lower until you're now on the water.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's exactly it. So that's how you land. And then at that point, you can kind of ease it down. Having differential thrust or your rudder dipping into the water when the tail sits down into the water helps with control. You can get pontoons with little rudders and little servos that you can hook in. And those are actually really good at helping you steer around the water. Because, I mean, if you think about it, if you're a Cessna on pontoons, your rudder isn't going to get a lot of authority.
No.
You know, so the best way is to get little rudder servos in those things. So keep that in mind when you select one or build one. Okay, so something went wrong, and now your plane is upside down, floating gently and being kind of pushed by the wind further away, right? Because that's inevitably what happens. Or you landed, but you kind of like cut the throttle and dumped it a bit, and the nose caught just enough for the momentum to flip it over. Or it grabs a wingtip, and now you're just doing circles, and it's not coming back out of the water.
Because you tore one of the pontoons off.
Yeah, that happened to me. You know, the one, you know, just loosed, and it's like, oh, well, and it was on 3 inches of water. But it was like the entire football field was 3 inches of water.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, that's going to be a long walk in a little bit of water. Wet feet that day. Anyway, so what do you want to do? What do you want to have with you? You want to have, like, ultimately when you go, you want to have basically a retrieval plan.
Okay.
If you think you're a great fisherman and you can cast really far, that's a method, but I've never heard anybody use it. But I thought of it just now. You just like cast it out, get a hook in the plane, and just start reeling it back in, gentle and slow. If it's kind of limping along and doing circles, but they generally go a direction you want, you could do that slowly. But probably what you're going to do is basically you're either going to get like a model boat or build one out of like a dish pan and like a pusher prop in the back. And then what you want to do is you want to have it like PVC arms with pool noodles on the outside edge, like bumpers.
Uh-huh.
And you want to have those arms, like goalposts, to be bigger than your plane, or about as big as the model you're flying.
So you essentially go out there and scoop your plane up.
Well, it won't really scoop it up. It'll just sort of catch it so that as you turn the boat to bring it back, it'll kind of keep it in that little basket.
Where did you get this idea from?
I've watched a lot of people tank some stuff into some water someday. It was awesome. And then like the follow-up video was, now I need to go buy, no, I'm going to build a boat. And they basically went to get a big Ziploc container. And that was what they did is they basically, they had some awful little boat. I don't know what, maybe they even grabbed their kids' like toy boat from the bathtub or something. And they like put a stick with a motor on it. And then they put a Tupperware container with all the electronics. And then they literally like zip tied that to 2 cross arms. And then they put the PVC tubes with, And as long as it's sort of balanced, and they would put like shot or some sort of weights in there, just like sandbags and stuff, just to keep it so it's level. And then they said, okay, let's go. And they just put it in the water and like kind of tested around a little bit. And then they went out and basically pushed their plane back to the shore. So if you can, stand in a spot where the boat can come all the way to the shore and you don't have to step in the water.
There you
go. If you can. So you can take a look at a couple of those things. I know, speaking of Peter Streeple, that was one of the things he has done in his thing. I think he created 3D printed files for a really cool tugboat. And he had that specifically with like a little harpoon gun on it and FPV. So he could press a button and it would shoot the harpoon out to what he was trying to retrieve. And then it was like a little FPV on it. So, because he wanted to have fun with it.
Right.
You know, and he had a couple, you know, you can buy like a really cheap RC boat from like Walmart or wherever, and just use that as your base, you know, and then just take out the receiver and put in one that's more reliable.
Okay.
So those are ways to retrieve. So just keep that in mind. Assume something will go wrong and protect against the things you need, you know, when that goes wrong. Tony was mentioning when we were talking about this, he's like, honestly, you don't need to super protect it, you know, but you're going to get spray, you're going to get water. And as long as your boat is reasonably protected or your plane is reasonably protected and you have a good hatch where you keep your electronics, you probably don't have to really waterproof your electronics, but it doesn't hurt if you take at least a little mild precautions.
Right.
Like Scotch, like even the spray of Scotch Guard or something, you know, just something to kind of keep the water from getting deep in there.
Right. All right. We got anything else on that?
No, I think that's it.
All right. Well, we talk about what we're going to be working on and then get out of here.
Okay. I'm going to get that Star Voyager thing in the sky. I'm probably going to get the Spitfire that I'm going to build next time. I'm probably going to do much like I had and get a skin on it or get whatever scheme I'm going to put on it.
Right.
I'm going to get on it. Let's see. I have the P61 on the table, and by the end of the week, I'm going to figure out what went wrong with it so that I can get that ready to maiden before you get down, so that when I move it, it's in one good shape. Because right now it's on the table we need to play D&D on.
Kind of need that.
Yeah, kind of need that. So there's a couple planes that, and what is that? I'm going to try to maiden the what is that plane that I was working on forever? It has lights in it and stuff.
Oh,
goodness night. I'm going to figure out how to fasten the little metal clip or the little metal clips on there properly so that they won't come apart, and then I can actually give it a maiden flight.
Okay.
Darn it. Now I won't be able to think of it. Well, on the outro, I'm sure I'll remember.
Okay.
All right, go ahead. What about you? What are you going to work on?
Well, I've got to go in and replace a missing nut on a servo arm control rod clevis, and then get those tightened back down and put the dab glue. I need to go into each of those push rods, and I finally got a Dremel.
Dremel?
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay.
I call them Dremels.
You're French. I don't know
apparently.
I don't know how. I don't understand it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Anyway, I've got one, so I can put a little grinder wheel on it and grind the flat spot for that screw. Because I need to do that for all the push rods. Because I think the elevator and the rudder gave out and were slipping, and actually the elevator control horn came unglued, so I need to reglue that. But I'd like to work on that because that shouldn't take too much. I don't know if I'll get around to the maiden because we're going to be out of town this weekend. And then the Spitfires. So try to get some progress done on Spitfires so that leading up to the build night, got a little bit done. I'm not going in there with nothing built.
Okay. Oh, the spray is called Corrosion X.
Okay.
That's that spray that smells like peanuts. And there's 2 grades, and they're both good. But if you're going to saltwater, if you know you're going to go in saltwater, get the heavy duty stuff.
And I want to keep messing in Photoshop, getting the Spitfire livery for Flight Fest figured out. And you and I will probably be communicating on that a little more this week as I get the layer mask set up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're definitely. I'm with you. I think we'll be working together this week to get that, because what I want to do is have enough time. So if you're coming out to the second Spitfire build night, and that you have time to get that printed out, in some fashion or another.
Yep.
And use it and join us.
All right. Well, anything else?
No, I feel better now that I know it's Corrosion X. Oh my gosh. No, that's it.
All right. Well, then, as always, guys, we thank you for tuning in and listening. We hope you've enjoyed listening to us just ramble as much as we enjoy rambling. As always, you can reach out to us at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com, or you can reach Matthew at aviationrcnoob.com, or you can reach me, Joe, at aviationrcnoob.com. Feel free to join our Discord server, join us in there, chat with us. We got a bunch of kind of real good community of guys who like to be helpful and have a good time. Follow us on our Facebook page where we post our events or any important updates. If you like, swing by our Patreon page, sign up to be a patron.
Help us do some really interesting, fun things. We have a bunch of ideas. Some of it is merch.
We do?
Yeah, some of it's merch, some of it's stickers and things like that we'd love to do a lot more of. And, it just, it costs money, and, having a little bit of help with that would help us get those things happening sooner.
Mm-hmm. And that was it, I think.
Yeah. You did good.
All right. You too. Good job, man.
Dude, I want to build this Drachenfield or whatever that's called.
Uh-huh.
That thing's awesome.
The Drachenflieger?
Yeah, the Drachenflieger. The name itself, I don't know. It just reminds me of some heavy metal song.
Hey, we haven't ended, right?
Yeah? What does that mean?
Say goodbye, Matt.
Bye.
Bye. Now you can tell me about it.
Just say goodbye, Matt, already. Come on. We could just end this already.
Killing me, man.
I know, sorry, bud.
No, you're good.
I thought we were done. It was going to be good, like outro banter.
Oh, it's outro banter.
Oh, it is. I know. That's a really neat looking plane, though. But I could see how much drag that thing must have.
Because I can tell you what I want to do is have the outro music swelling.
Yeah.
Building like it always does. And then right when you're like, man, I really want to just have the outro music cut. And you're like, man, I really want to build this thing. It's like, just like, Matt, we're not done. Say goodnight. Good night. Good night.
Yeah, we'll do it. That'll be good. Why in the world can I not find this thing?
I don't know. Getgood.com.
I just had a thought.
What's that?
Making a biplane Spitfire.
Yeah, Lord.
Oh my God, what's the matter with me? We're at the 1 hour mark.
Yeah.
Yeah.